I'm going to actually go ahead and get us started. Welcome everyone here today. And so again, I'm Natasha Scott. I'm the Director of Educator Engagement at iCivics, and it is a pleasure to have you all here with us this evening. We're really excited for a great session. It's going to be very interactive, it is not a talking head session for an hour, I will tell you that. And very excited, and again, thankful for my colleagues, Emma and Patricia, who are joining me this evening. And we are going to kind of jump right into everything. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see where we are today and get started in today's discussion. Okay, and so if you are clicking on that link for that Google site today, what it should bring you to a page that looks just like this, Educating for American Democracy, and our session today focusing on motivating student agency and exploring America's shared story. So if you're here in the right place. Now, just to quickly walk you through the site before we dive into our content, right at the top, that's the exact same slide deck that I'm going to be talking through. Sometimes it's nice to have your own personal version and be able to click through. So please feel free to use that if you'd like. You will also see throughout our session today, we're going to have Padlets. If you don't know what Padlet is basically a tool that allows you to interact. I see some of you already putting your location, which is wonderful. When we do sessions like this, it's always amazing to see where we are in this virtual space. We're not all in the same room physically, so feel free to take a moment. And what you're going to do, if you're not familiar with Padlet, in the top right-hand corner, you have that pink plus sign. If you press that plus sign there, what you're going to be able to do is add your location there, and we start to see this map populate us. I will say this is a brand new map for the last, for the last year in the development of this project, almost 2 years now, but in the last year of stakeholder sessions and conversations, we have another map that just shows people from across the country, just really tracking how we engage and how many people are actually involved in this Educating for American Democracy project. Okay. And additionally, right below that Padlet, what you're going to find is a spot just for introductions. You'll see part of the reason that we're doing introductions and conversations in the Padlet. I'm not sure about you guys, but I know when I jump into a session and the chat starts going so fast that you can't even read what was written before you, because everyone just keeps throwing ideas out there, which is wonderful. But in a Padlet, you can actually keep all the ideas here, and all that concepts, all that thinking is in one spot. So go ahead, tell us your name, where you're from, and if you want to share any first memories of engaging with history and civics, go right ahead. And for those of you in the classroom, Padlet is a great tool to get some of that engagement when you can't have everyone on mic. With a group of 44 people, we can't necessarily go around unmuting everyone. So pleasure. And Patricia and Emma will keep putting that link in the chat. So if you're new and just joining us, please just feel free to click on the link that gets put in there for the Google site, just getting a sense of who's in the room. And we have a range. I will say, in terms of our participants for today, we have a variety of people. We have participants who are in, we have participants who are educators. We have participants who are in the elementary classroom, middle school classroom. We have college professors. We have a variety of people who are engaging with us this evening. Okay, so I'm actually going to switch over. These are interesting marks that are on our screen. Let's see if we can get those off. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so for today, no one else is left in the chat. I haven't left anyone hanging, so that means we're ready. We're going to jump on into the conversation. Okay, so those of you who are joining us here today, and to just talk deeper about the Educating for American Democracy project, and very specifically on the design challenges. So our session, our Educating for American Democracy initiative, has been funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Department of Education, and led with our primary investigators from Circle, iCivics, from Harvard and Arizona State and Tufts University. And we're very excited that we're able to have such deep conversations and engagement around history and civics. So it's a cross-ideological team of experts, historians, political scientists, and educators, and over 300 contributors who helped create and develop this roadmap. This roadmap was a labor of love over the last almost 2 years, really having these rich conversations, trying to come to consensus, and really having richer discussions together. Let's see, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we think about the Educating for American Democracy and the roadmap itself, the EAD roadmap, so you'll hear us refer to it a lot as the EAD roadmap. As we think about the EAD roadmap, really what this is it's guidance for history and civic education and excellence in that. Okay, thinking about what to teach and how to teach with history and civics, and building students' knowledge and capacities to sustain America's constitutional democracy. Making sure that as we think about this roadmap is not a curriculum or a mandate. It's not just a series of facts. So lots of times when we think about state standards and things like that, we just think of a series of facts. This is not that. What this is actually thinking about how we embed inquiry, and we have these design principles that states can then take that and develop and deliver excellent history and civic learning, because we know that in different communities, it's going to look different. And these guiding questions really get to the depth that we want to see. And when we think about our ambitious goals, so this project it's definitely not a short-term project. We are in the long game here. So this project, our goal is 60 million students, 100,000 schools, 1 million teachers. So basically all of our schools, all of our teachers, all of our students being civic ready. And that is the goal for this project. This project is not a one and done project. This project is going to take time and for many deep conversations. And we're excited for today, because today is actually the first of our PD series. So we have a 3-set series right now, just scratching the surface on the design challenges. So we're really excited to have you here as we start thinking about how can we begin to reach and have these conversations to make sure that our students, our schools, our teachers are civic ready. So when we think about the design of the roadmap has several different components. The roadmap has 7 themes. As these 7 themes, we think about civic participation, our changing landscape, we the people, a new government and constitution, institutional and social transformation, a people in the world, and contemporary debates and possibilities. Today, as we talk about design challenges 1 and 2, which I'll go in a little more depth in a little bit, we're really going to actually be touching on themes 1, 2, and 3 as well. So you'll see connections being made across those themes. Within each of these themes, what you're going to see when you download the roadmap, and I will ask my colleagues to, and I think they already did, I love when they read my mind, download the roadmap if you haven't done so yet, or go to the website and see the interactive version of the roadmap. What you're going to see for each of the themes, you're going to see not only a theme description, but thematic questions and key concepts that ground the conversation and ground the inquiry for each of those themes. One of the next elements that's an amazing attribute of this roadmap, and as a former elementary school teacher that I love and appreciate, is the vertical alignment across K-12. You take a theme like civic participation and you actually see how it grows and becomes more complex throughout the grade levels, where you may start with, how have I helped my family or class? How do people describe who they are and who I am in kindergarten as we think about civic participation? But gradually it becomes more complex as students begin to think about how and why do people take action to solve problems, when and where and have leaders and change makers emerge in American history. So you see the scaffolding moving from self in the self and making connections to self in the elementary grades to becoming more content-based and more rigorous as they progress through the grades. But you see that nice vertical scaffolding. So it's not one of those situations where a topic is done once and never touched again, but it actually continues to be connected throughout. Now, another element, another piece of the Educating for American Democracy initiative is actually the EAD core pedagogical principles. Now, these six principles really establish the expectation for excellence for all and that growth mindset necessary to achieve that, and then gradually transitions into building an EAD ready classroom and school. As we think about stages 1 through 3, really thinking about how we're setting the foundation for learning dispositions, as well as our learning dispositions and the classroom environment that has to happen in order to get to those really rigorous conversations that we see begin in inquiry as a primary mode of learning, and then practice of constitutional democracy and student agency, and then wrapping up this cycle with assess, reflect, and improve, really making sure that we're thinking about the feedback that we're getting from our students and continuing to improve practice. Now, the final element of all of these pieces are the design challenges. Now, the design challenges are going to be the heart and soul of today's conversation. Really thinking about how can we dive deeper into these design challenges that really leverage the tension that we see in history. Those moments, rather than, so something that the roadmap has done, rather than just sidestepping these points in history that are complex and can be tough conversations in the classroom, what the roadmap has done is actually leaned into that, okay? Leaned into that tension, leaned into that complexity and within these design challenges. Now, today we're going to touch upon design challenges, just design challenge 1 and 2. So motivating agencies, sustaining the republic, and America's plural yet shared story. So when we think about design challenge number 1, motivating agency, sustaining the republic, really the 3 core driving questions within this design challenge: how can we help students understand the full context of their role as citizens and civic participants without creating paralysis or a sense of insignificance of their own agency in relation to the magnitude of our society, the globe, and shared challenges? How can we help students become engaged citizens who also sustain civil disagreement, civic friendship, and thus American constitutional democracy? And how can we help students pursue civic action that is authentic, responsible, and informed? So as you think about those design challenge elements, you really see those connections to theme number 1. They really begin to shine through as we think about that theme of civic participation. So now that I've been talking at you for several minutes straight, we're actually going to stop. And I want you to think about, how would you describe the concept of an engaged citizen with families or students that you support? And why would you describe it like that? And what you're going to do is, if you go back to your Google site, if you moved away from it, some of you did not, we're right on number 2. So how would you describe the concept of an engaged citizen with families and students that you support, and why? So we'll give everyone a minute just to share their thoughts and ideas. And the educator in me never has a problem with that moment of silence, like giving people that moment to think and write and process rather than just speaking at you for the entire time. So I see someone who cares about the greater good and willing to take action, seeks out information about their community and try to make it better. Someone who participates. Willing to participate in the growth of their community, investigating issues. And on your pad that you can scroll down, and you could actually continue to read what your peers have been saying and what your peers are sharing. Someone who's aware of issues, someone who's involved in their community at different levels, someone who cares about the state of the country and their community, seeking out information of issues and events. And as we see our individual ideas populate here, we can really start to see the threads that come to the surface. We see the thread of in terms of engagement, not just of Did you go and vote? But are you informed? Okay. We see information in terms of caring about community. Okay. Not just their local community, but their community at different levels. Okay. Thinking about solutions. Okay. I see a point here, engaging in civil dialogue about these issues. Okay. That willingness to have conversations, that willingness to have that civil disagreement. Okay. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. And you can keep posting your ideas here as I continue on. Now, as we think about this concept of civic participation and how this concept of citizen and the term citizen and the term civic participant come into play, both in the roadmap as well as just in the legal context. So legally, under the 14th Amendment, we know all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction, therefore, are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So this is what it describes. As such, citizens have privileges, immunities, rights, such as life, liberty, or property. Now, as we think about this legal definition of citizen, and we think about the students that are sitting in front of us within our classroom, we know that we have a very vast representation of our community and of students. And some students have legal status, some students do not. Yet, that's part of the reason why within the roadmap, we have this broader understanding of citizen and of this concept of a civic participant in terms of that civic participant and that concept of a citizen, not in the legal sense, but that, as Dr. Peter Levine, professor of citizenship and public affairs at Tufts University, states, you are a citizen of a group regardless of your legal status. If you seriously ask, what should we do? What should we do? Think about the points that your peers were making on that Padlet. Okay, being informed, asking questions, caring about your community. Okay, all of those fall into that bucket of what should we do? Okay, what are the challenges in our community? What are the solutions that we can do to address those challenges? And you really see that broader concept of a citizen of a group really come to the surface. And though with the roadmap, we do believe that students need to understand the term citizen and the framing of citizen from a legal concept, but in our work, we also think it's important to have that broad understanding of the citizen as a member of a group and a part of a community, caring and thinking about what should we do. Okay. And this is one of the points of tension that we see within design challenge number 1 and the language in design challenge number 1. Additionally, in design challenge 1, what we see come to the surface is this concept of civil disagreement and civic friendship. Okay? And the push and pull that we see between that terminology, understanding that civil disagreement is the ability and commitment to fighting fair. Okay, thinking about honesty, trustworthiness, okay, charitable interpretation, and being able to move forward together. This concept of civil disagreement. Civil disagreement does not say that I'm agreeing with you just because. I'm just going to nod and smile. I think about what happens. Think about those conversations. Everyone's had them. Think about those conversations where you just nod and smile, rather than being honest and rather than sharing opinions that might differ with someone else. And we see that virtue of civic friendship that mirrors and goes along with civil disagreement hand in hand. Okay, that concept of civic friendship and that understanding of being able to share ideals and principles and constitutional forms of self-government, even though we might not agree, even though that we might debate our policy differences, okay? Even though we see that tension and we might debate back and forth, there's still this sense of honesty and trustworthiness, and still the sense of using information, okay? Grounding our conversations in that. So as we think about this tension that we can see where this arises in the classroom, okay? And understanding that students need to understand how civil disagreement and civic friendship go hand in hand and how that push and pull goes back and forth. Now, one of the things that I want us to do now is actually take a look at some of the driving questions. So I'm going to pull back one of the earlier slides, and I want us to take a look at the driving questions and think about How does the EAD roadmap and just some of the history driving questions and the civics driving questions capture different approaches to civic participation in theme 1? Okay, does the roadmap, and I'll click through here just so that you can see them all, does the roadmap capture a variety of approaches for that civic participation, creating the space for that civil disagreement and that civic friendship? So take a minute. I'm going to leave this this slide up for right now so that you can actually look at the terminology here. I decided not to make you go back and forth to the website right now. I know you're excited, but you can poke around there too. But take a look at these and think about, where do you see those examples of civic participation? And where do you see those tension of civil disagreements and civic friendships? And go ahead and share that on our Padlet number 3. I'll toggle over so that everyone can kind of see where we're at. There we go. We see some ideas coming up, and I will go back to the slide so that you have it in front of you. There's nothing worse than the person who's facilitating asks you to look at something and then they move it. I'm like, oh, I wasn't done looking at it. So I'll leave it up here for a minute. Take about 30 more seconds. I realized my cold New England heater was probably some nice background noise for everyone, so I decided to turn it off for you. I do remember that we're human in these sessions. It's important to recognize that. Okay, so we see some points coming to the surface. Concepts of leadership, civic friendship, media literacy skills, healthy relationships. Okay. Seeing how I see different levels. Okay, notice when we think about community, so with my elementary hat on, we always start with our smallest community, and we see how that grows. And you see that grow through the vertical alignment of the roadmap as well.
And if I could just chime in, I'll say as a secondary educator, it's so hard sometimes to conceive of how you would teach these concepts, right? These dry, complex civic concepts to younger kids. And the roadmap truly shows the way and makes it so I almost feel like, well, that's obvious. Why did I think of that? Yes, community and civic friendship and leadership and simply paying attention. Those are all expressions of civic participation.
Thank you, Emma. And also bringing to the surface that in the development of these roadmap questions, we brought in elementary teachers. We talked to, which is essential for just to raise to the surface, because we were really getting to people who are in the classroom, who are boots on the ground, who are saying like, this is actually how we frame this concept of civic friendship. This is how we frame this concept of civic participation. Okay, how we think about the concept of even just helping, right? How do leaders help? Okay, with our youngest learners, and gradually becoming more complex. Okay, excellent. I love how civic participation changes over time. Keeping up with constant change. And I love that I'm seeing here that people are catching on that having this concept reinforced again and again and again really helps deepen the understanding of our students. And that's part of the reason when we think about these design challenges, think about this design challenge and getting to this tension of motivating agency and sustaining the republic and what it looks like at each level. And I get excited about this, but if you close your eyes and you envision for a second, that kindergartner who is starting this conversation, starting to understand what a civil disagreement and civic friendship looks like with their friends and their peers, what that student looks like and how they engage by the time they're in high school. Completely different. Okay, and the depth will be utterly amazing. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your ideas here. And we're actually going to go ahead. So you can continue jotting down your ideas. Again, this is why I love Padlet. And rather than just using the chat, so thank you for everyone for engaging today and using the Padlet and dropping ideas. This way you can read it and it doesn't get lost and fly by. I can never read it fast enough in the chat. need to toggle back to my PowerPoint if it will let me. There we go. Okay, so as we jump into our second design challenge, now design challenge 1, really, you see the direct connection with theme 1 and that concept of civic participation, and that the tension that we see in terms of motivating agency and having our students feel like they can make change in this vast system that we're in, right? And feeling that tension, that pressure. Now, design challenge 2, what we begin thinking about here is clearly by the title, America's plural yet shared stories. Okay, thinking about how do we integrate the perspectives of Americans from all different backgrounds when narrating a history of the US and explicating the content of philosophical foundations of American Constitution and democracy. How do we do this consistently across all of America's historical periods and conceptual content? Sometimes we see that, and this I can't help but narrate, sometimes we see that happening during certain points only. We forget we have to do this constantly. And how can this be more plural and therefore more accurate story of our history and foundations also be a common story, the shared inheritance of all Americans? So we can feel, this is actually one of my favorite design challenges. Emma knows we each have our favorites. We have our favorite design challenges. And we think about this complexity that we see in terms of integrating the perspectives of Americans from all backgrounds and seeing that, and how do we fit that into the narrative, right? How do we fit that into the narrative? Now, so of course, you can't come to a session and not look at some primary sources just for fun. Okay, so as we think of this image of American progress, on Padlet, I think we're on Padlet number 4 now. As we think about Padlet number 4, thinking about what are the perspectives represented in this image that could be explored in more depth, in general, not more depth because we haven't started, but could be explored in depth. So take a minute, kind of look at the image, think about what characteristics that you see in this image could be explored in more depth as we think about this concept of westward expansion, manifest destiny, come to the surface, bubble to the surface through this image. I'll scroll down for those of you who are wondering. We're on Padlet number 4, and I'll go back so that you can continue looking at the image. And continue, if you have those juicy questions, keep throwing them in the chat. We love them. We love seeing them. We love sparking our thoughts and ideas. And Emma is paying close attention to the chat, so we're capturing them all.
And just opining, I'm no authority on this, and would love others to chime in and answer each other's questions as we go. I'm just sharing my own perspectives and experiences.
Okay, I'm going to go back to our Padlet. Let's see how we're doing. Progress for whom? That's the first question that caught my mind. That captures this design challenge almost perfectly. Okay. Okay, so we have, if there's cowboys in the background, Black, Hispanic, Native Americans, feeling of their land being taken, again, settlers who are moving west. Thinking the progress being brought by pale skin, thinking about who is being left out, who isn't included in this representation. So let's see. So we have, I'm going to identify some of the things that people were saying. There we go. Okay, let's see. So we have some workers here. We have our Indigenous community over there. We have some more people in depth here. Wagon, every time I look at this image, I also think about the buffalo and the impact, think about the impact on that. And so you see here, and we just started pulling some elements towards the surface that you could be diving into deeper conversations with your students just about this one moment. Okay. And when we think about how do we do this consistently, okay, this is also why when we're thinking about the roadmap and we're thinking about getting into this information, thinking about the depth that we need to go to get to that tension that we see, the depth that we need to go in order to have all of those perspectives. This is not something that you can just define, what is this, and move on. Okay. This is where you have to lean into the tension. You have to lean into the different perspectives that are represented and think about whether they're positive or negative, right? Whether you agree on the position, where you disagree on the position, thinking about that being the place where that civil disagreement and civic friendship really come to the surface and having that show there. Hide my annotation tool. Go. And again, everyone, thank you for taking your time to share your thoughts and ideas. For a group of 50, the last thing that we want is for you to be sitting there and not kind of continuing to push your thinking. And so we really appreciate that, sharing your thoughts and ideas, and your peers, and the collaboration is really what helps this learning get deeper. Now, when we think about kind of the connections and the alignment that we see to theme 2 and theme 3 through design challenge number 2, through this concept of this shared narrative of our history, we see kind of how do communities shape the land, what makes people move from one place to another, okay? And that's all the way down in kindergarten. And then we see how this gradually becomes more complex. How do borders change over time and why? What gives societies their identities? Okay. How have different groups of Americans taken responsibility for the landscape of the United States? How has that changed over time? If that image did not show change over time, in that one, taking the time to analyze that one image, imagine as we start to put together primary source sets, imagine as you have those deeper conversations in your classroom where you really grapple with that tension that you see. And then you think about that concept, that connection that design challenge 2 brings to theme 3, the connection in terms of what kinds of stories tell us, including, so this is all perspectives, tell us who we are and where we're from. How do people become a community? How have different groups shaped our society? How did the institution of enslavement and practices of indigenous removal and even extermination affect national unity in the US? So going back to that question, progress for who? Okay. So we really see the direct correlation between these design challenges and the themes, and we see that relationship happen back and forth, where the rich content that is captured in these questions within the themes really create these points of tension that you see within the design challenges, allowing you to go deeper. Now, one of the elements within the report, so as I mentioned earlier, we have a series of documents that go together within this enormous initiative. We have the roadmap, which has the themes and the questions and the design challenges across K-12. We have the pedagogy companion, which goes into more depth about those pedagogical core principles. And then we have the report that really builds the context and the complexity around this initiative. Now, as we think about that report, I would say take the time to read through it and read all the way to the back. In the back, so this is just something that I pulled out of the back of that report, as thinking about when we think about this concept of diversity and inclusion, making sure that we are being purposeful about the inclusion, and diversity and inclusion for civic purposes, not just to be able to say, check, 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 right? Great, I have this perspective, I have this perspective, I have this perspective, but rather trying to get to a deeper understanding and a deeper civic learning when we're incorporating those perspectives. Okay, so to develop skills to understand others' perspectives, to understand what the world may look like from our fellow citizens or civic participants, think about how to interpret others' expressions of ideas and values. Okay, to build the knowledge that anchors complete understanding of how history's many players intersected and interacted in the course of human events. Okay? So we see all of this rich reasoning and understanding in terms of why we want to make sure that we're including that diversity and the diverse perspectives and that inclusion within our narrative, but making sure that we kind of, I think this list really is something that to bring back as you continue to dive deeper into these different moments in history and dive deeper into the themes and think about how are you continuing to incorporate those diverse perspectives constantly. Okay, and what is the purpose that you're using it for? Is it just to say, check, my standard says I have to have this perspective, I did it, I can move on? Or is it really to get to that deeper tension? Okay, that deeper element that we see come to the surface with the design challenge. So now what we're going to do, it's actually, wow, we're actually right on time. I'm actually very impressed. Yes, a little cheer here. We are actually going to dive into some small group discussions. I think this is something that is important to just take the time to talk with other people here. We think about people who are across the country right now, taking the time. So what we're going to do is taking this question, what resonates with you as you consider the importance of incorporating design challenges 1 and 2 into your work. Now, as we think of this, just like as our design challenges say, we know there are opportunities, both in curriculum, both in experiential experiences that our kids could be engaging in, but we also know there's challenges. We're realists here. We know there's opportunities, we know there's challenges. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to break up into groups, and I'll break you up in a minute. Let me just go over directions first, and I'm going to scroll down again. So in your small group, you're actually going to have a Jamboard. So Jamboard, another digital English chart place, which is wonderful. The joy of this, you can actually manipulate it, move it around. Okay. And so when I break you up into groups, what you're going to do is you're going to find your group number, and each of them, you'll see in the top left-hand corner, and each of the links breaks out to a certain number of groups. I'm trying to be cognizant. We don't want to break the system. So that's part of the reason why we have so many of the groups. But what you're going to do is you're actually just going to think about what opportunities exist in your community and what challenges may arise. So when you get into your group, directions are right at the beginning. Take a moment, say hello, introduce yourselves. And then what you're going to do is you're actually going to click on your sticky icon. Okay, and type your idea, and it's great because it actually pops it up right on your page, and you can move it around. So you can put it and sort it into the different buckets. So if you think of this as 4 quadrants, thinking about what opportunities exist for that design challenge 1, that motivating agency and those connections to civic participation, what challenges arise, thinking about the same with design challenge number 2, America's plural yet shared story, and what challenges may arise. Okay, so we're going to give you about 10 minutes to break up into groups, have a conversation, talk with someone, get some ideas, share your experiences. And when you're throwing your stickies on here, if you want to put where you're from or even your state, it's so fascinating as you see that pop in. Okay, so I'm going to break us up into groups now. This is always I'm going to warp speed into different places. Okay. And I'm going to put us into some breakout rooms, sign automatically. There you go. I'm going to open the rooms and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you for coming back together, everybody. Really great to see you again. We are actually going to wrap up our discussion today. I think one of the great things about Jamboard is you can see other groups who wrote some ideas, some groups didn't, and that's perfectly fine. But just take a glance at what your colleagues are saying and seeing the challenges. I think understanding that we're not in this space alone and we are working together to make this change and to think about history and civic instruction differently and shift that practice, it's going to take all of us together. So that's part of the reason why we're all diving in, really having that conversation and engaging. So I'm going to share my screen to kind of wrap us up for today. There we go. So thank you for engaging with your small group discussion. And let's kind of close out for today. So a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, we've been talking about today, we talked about design challenges 1 and 2. And right now we have a design challenge competition, art competition. As I mentioned in the beginning, the design challenges are actually one of the few elements on our website that don't have any graphics, because we couldn't find just that one graphic. I mean, imagine a graphic trying to say, like, why do we need to share everyone's stories and have that tension captured? But we decided to leave it up to our K-12 students. So we have our design challenge contest that is open. It is on the website. You can find the submission, the place to submit in the top of the website. And we also have a student-friendly language for those design challenges. So as we think about that, it's that, as Emma said, it's our cheat sheet. It's our student-friendly version. Sometimes it's even our adult-friendly version. Take a read for it. I really love how we've broken it down to make it more digestible for our students. So Emma has thrown that into the chat. So that is open now. You guys kind of have the leg up over here with our first conversation together. You have a little bit more thinking that to contribute for Design Challenge 1 and 2. So keep that in mind. And also, if you haven't followed us yet on social media, follow us at EAD Roadmap on Twitter and hashtag EAD Roadmap. If you wanted to stay up to date on terms of what's happening, there are events happening constantly for EAD. So this is wonderful. Excellent. I like how someone pointed out how the entire educational community, not just civics and social studies teachers, can work in the roadmap. This is interdisciplinary. You see that connection across. Thank you so much for bringing that to the surface. Okay, and we really want to make sure that we capture any of your final thoughts. So we had some conversations around Design Challenge 1. We had conversations around Design Challenge 2. We really shared our thoughts and ideas. And yes, get the superintendents on board. And if you need documentation of participation, a certificate of attendance, a letter, make sure you complete your exit ticket, because that's our documentation that you were actually here with us today. So you can go ahead on our site for today. You can actually fill it out right there. The questions pop up. You can type right in, and it will let you complete all of that there. So take a moment. And the last question on that exit ticket is, if you need that documentation, just check the box and it'll bring you to a contact, so you can put your first name, last name, and confirm your email address, and we'll send you a letter that says you participated in today's workshop, and make sure that you have that. And let's see, as we close out, go back one, save the date. This is just our first conversation. So thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed all of your participation. There's nothing better as a facilitator, as you see everyone throwing their ideas on those Padlets and really taking the time to sit in those breakout rooms and have those conversations. So just thank you. Thank you for taking the time for joining us tonight. We have 2 more sessions. Please, the links to register are there, and they're in the chat again too. Our next session on May 11th, we're going to dive into Design Challenge 3 and Design Challenge 4. And then on June 9th, we're going to dive into Design Challenge number 5. So join us. There'll continue to be sessions like this. I'll be facilitating. You get to be with me for 3 more sessions. It'll be great. Have more conversations and get more interactivity, because it will not be a talking head at you for the entire hour. And with that being said, 2 minutes early. We're on a roll tonight.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll give you those 2 minutes to to complete that exit ticket, share your feedback so we can continue to make this better for you. And other than that, I hope you have a great night or a great afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks, everybody.